the impossible one. And the impossible one, you can see these 4 options: regular ticket, regular plus the guide, reduce, and the free admission ticket. When you indicate that you want a ticket, you are greeted with the red message saying, in order to acquire a free admission ticket, you need to buy 1 regular ticket. I mean, you need to pay for the ticket in order, yeah, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So I thought, wait a minute, there is a bug, and they probably don't know it because, you know, the pandemic, everything going on, is just too much. So I need to tell them. I need to let them know, and they will fix it. It's not that hard, and the museum across the street has the right model implemented. So I know it's possible. So after a couple of phone calls and emails, I found the right direction to write, and they answered back. A few days later, I got my answer, and my answer was like, and this is not the first time I experienced this, they were explaining me how to use the website. They were telling me that, can you see this small blue text? It says pincha aquí in Spanish, click here. This is the link to get the ticket for the free visiting days, like Sundays and Saturday evenings. So I was reading the email like, okay, no, I didn't make myself clear. I need to write them back again, and with the screenshots and everything explained. So yes, that's what I did. I wrote them back once and twice, and then I just stopped because they weren't replying. Yeah, so I missed that. I missed that bit. But in my holidays, besides learning about the different models used by museums, states museums to sell tickets, I learned about how public sector design concerns different people. Concerns citizens, the civil servant who got my writing, the public manager who decided to write me back with a different story, and the policymaker who probably will never get to know about my story, unless it's in this talk today. But the bit that I'm most interested in of the story is the 5th element of this, which is the private provider. Because what I found is that private solutions are shaping the way we experience public services. If you think if you live in a city and you drive or you have a car, you may have been a user of these kind of applications. Those are mobility applications, very common nowadays. But we can think about other types of applications developed by private companies, like Novoville on the right, which is a citizen engagement app developed by a Greek startup. Now is used in more than 45 countries, and you can, besides communicating with your local government, with the city council, you can request services or report problems. You can do a number of things. Or Corti, which is a machine learning company analyzing 911 emergency call to help healthcare staff diagnose and treat conditions like cardiac arrest and stroke. So it's helping them to make decisions. And all these kind of applications developed by private companies in different categories are part of what we call govtech ecosystem, which is where I work right now. This is where now my everyday life is around this. And we define this govtech ecosystem as interaction spaces between governments and innovative SMEs, and they are, or startups, and they are creating solutions to public challenges based on technology. And when we started 3 years ago, it was like an emerging market, we said. Now it's a consolidated space around the globe with different initiatives and challenges and laboratories happening all the time. And it's becoming a quite important marketplace. We publish every year a list of the top 100 startups in Latin America, developing different solutions. So we can see how this ecosystem is evolving. And we also run govtech laboratories in Madrid region, for instance, or in other places. You can see some from Portugal. This is last year list. So we run also laboratories and projects. And through these innovation projects, what we are witnessing is that govtech can be applied to many sectors, of course, and public activities, procedures, services, operations, and it has a huge potential of impacting our everyday. Also, these projects has shown me how digital innovation can drive transformation within public sector, just like in private sector. You put a new technology, you introduce the new technology for a different use of data or combine sources or, I don't know, you name, or remove intermediaries, and things start moving inside the organization. They start, rethinking the processes and the structures and so on. However, sometimes there are unintended consequences. Sometimes when we apply frameworks or principles or assumptions that can work for us in the practice of design in the private sector, it just doesn't work for the public one, sorry. Because if we think about this Pareto rule or the concept of normal user, average user, extreme user, it doesn't exist in the public sector. There's not such a thing as normal or not normal, because we leave people out if we do that. Or when we apply patterns that may be successful in other scenarios to create engagement, is a disaster, I think. That's based on a real case. Someone decided that citizens engage more with public services through infinite scroll. I try to remember this statement by Kat Holmes, because when bringing these approaches and manners from our practice in the private sector, we design from a privileged place, from places that are so far away from other people, for realities that are so unreal to us, at least to me, so far away. And it's a public sector obligation not to forget about any of them. And I say privilege, but I think I could say blindness. And again, I'm talking about my very personal experience with design and policymaking in the public sector. This is my very first project with public sector. When I was working from the side of the provider, I was the fifth element, if you want. I was working with my former company, a design agency called Fjord. I think you know about them. And we work for the Social Security Authority in Spain, a huge, very important institutions dealing with work, health, and pensions, among other things. They wanted to reshape all their services and turn them into a digital model. I was really thrilled to be able to join this project. It was so complex. It was pure service. This is my background as designer, if I may say that, service design. And this was pure service. And I thought we knew it all, because we've been working for years in other sectors. So that was just, let's take our things and show them how it's done, something like that. Well, the first lesson was when you face the bidding process and the bidding condition. I don't know if you have ever gone through this painful process, but for me, I remember as a dreadful experience where I could see that all our holistic approaches and storylines and wonderful sales pitches were torn into pieces and crashed into tables and activities, lots, batches. It was horrible. And we were asked to give so much detail that I was thinking, okay, we are skipping the discovery phase or the exploration phase because we need to know it all already. I think there is a big room for improvement in the bidding processes, but also that from the design point of view, I realized how shallow our proposals were, how fast and easy decide on what needed to be done. We were not asked for too much explanation because we were the experts, And the public sector, no, it's like, give me all the detail until the last point, please. And then we learned that we were not explaining enough as they expected. And for us was like, everything is done just in the bidding process. Okay, we won the bid. And the next thing, we managed to get a room within the public client premises. A small room, but we were given a lot of freedom to work there. And we now, with the perspective of the years, I realized that we wanted to show how we innovate, how we did things so different from public servants, these poor people. And even if our intention was good, just to be open and accessible to them, I think we didn't think that much if that was the best way to do things. I would say my level of empathy with the reality was extremely low, very, very low. Like not really understanding their motivations and triggers and concerns and limitations. And I've been told many times that the ignorance of the designers is something fresh because they fear nothing and they challenge everything. I think that we should learn to control our ignorance a little bit, get to know more about that bliss of ignorance that take us to think that of course everyone will come to our studio to run the workshop and to split into groups and act the solution out that we do for any other clients. The fact is that they could not leave the premises because the regulation, the norms for them works differently. They are hired to work in a specific place and they cannot move around the city like we do, for instance. And when we asked for a place to do the workshop, we were given something like that. Big room, huge table, everybody sitting down, talking, not doing, not acting, not producing, very far away from our experiences. So we faced the bureaucracy, we faced the cultural organization side of the public sector and also the physicality, the reality of their spaces. And then we move into the more design crafts stuff, the visual part. We will discover that visual design was used like an ornament and there was no consistency whatsoever except from the flag and the shield that you have a very detailed description in one document. I couldn't find it again if I look for it, but I still have this screenshot of how to build the flag and the shield. That's it for the visual part. And the rest of the design brief, we had to build it out of the laws and the official publication of the state, which is really hard to read. So regulation has a big impact in the design of public sector, in the design of their touch points and the services, and is presented in a way that is so hard to read. But the worst part for me is that I'm pretty sure we were not the first ones doing that. I'm pretty sure we were not the last design team going through that process, and that the guys who were working with us, explaining to us how the social security work, were not doing that for the first time. And design-wise, my feeling is that digital public services start from scratch all the time. Within any innovation or design project, you will always have someone saying, we are not here to reinvent the wheel. Well, actually, we are all the time reinventing the wheel. In this path, all the time starting from zero. How is that possible? And of course, the outcome varies depending on many things, depending on your client, depending on your team, depending on your mood, depending on, I don't know, you name it. It's completely random. So how is it possible in a way that governments and public sector can guide and support the design of these solutions? What in the brief or in the bidding process? Is it possible that public services can shape private solutions for the better to help them? And of course, we have great examples of this. Anglo-Saxon, most of them, but not only. I really like this one from official website of the federal government of the United States. Besides the fact that they have a specific typeface design to be used across all websites, I would like to highlight this small element on top. Can you see the gray thing where it says an official website of the United States government? Here's how you know. What a wonderful small detail of how to build trust in every interaction. You may agree or not with the government who is running the White House at that moment, but at least you know that you can trust that source just because they're trying hard to teach you how. Or the examples from the UK, how they are building patterns to make sure that everyone registering, paying something, applying for something, requesting something is finding a similar process and is finding an improved process because someone is reviewing it and proposing new things, I guess. I'm pretty sure you know these pattern libraries from the GDS, which I wanted to highlight not because of the library itself, but because of the fact that they are presenting experimental approaches, things that still need more research to validate it. So they are showing work in progress. They are bold enough to show that. It is not very common in governments and public sector. Not only because they are used to do that or not, but also because we as society, I'm not sure that we allow them to do that. They have to be right and sure all the time. The GDS, of course, is a reference because they have been thinking about topics like voice interaction in government that, well, we still have the document with the flag guideline. Voice is too far away still for us. One of my favorite examples of good news and good things happening is from Portugal, Lab X. How they are using design and innovation to build experimental culture in the public sector in these living labs where they apply solutions from universities and other companies while their places are in use, and how they are generating a practice for public sector is very inspiring. Of course, Nordics countries, they have been ahead in many ways, and just being able to ask your government or the public institutions you are working with for a set of principles to guide your design or your work is amazing. And within the space of govtech, there are initiatives like STIR, Startup in Residence, an idea that started in San Francisco, and now you can find it in different countries and cities, and they work with all the funnel of public innovation. And what I find great is that they managed to tackle the problem of procurement and the bidding process that I presented before, how they help through public procurement for innovation, how they help civil servants and startups to move ahead in the relationship so they can build new proposals. Okay, now you don't see anything because something has decided to upgrade. But give me a moment.
Take your time.
I'm back with you. Can you see it now? The Startup in Residence panel?
Not yet. We see the stuff.
Yeah.
Now? Yeah.
I always forget to hit the button share because it's on the other side. So the Startup in Residence program as an example of how many times to tackle design and public policy topic conversation is not about design that we need to talk, but it's about other things like regulations or this kind of processes. All that to say, a very obvious thing, but very important one, that public services can be redesigned. Of course, you know that, but I don't think we knew that a few years ago. We can now say this like in a normal conversation, but that's a huge breakthrough, I think, because that's the way we realize that public services and policies are like that because someone thought about them like that. They didn't just grow on trees, someone created them. And if someone creates them, someone can redesign them and things can be rethought. And that is happening within the public sector itself. I will quote again the OECD. If you don't know it or you don't use the resources, I encourage you. They are doing a terrific job in all this transformation. And I say transformation and innovation and not design because many ways I see design informing these processes, but not necessarily applied as the design craft as we know it. So the OECD is doing this amazing job of defining what are the skills that a high-performing civil service should have. And these skills are used as a reference for many training programs for public sector, those who are informing the new initiatives that is shared, or places like Stimulab in Norway or Servicios Digitales de Aragón here in Spain, where they are taking frameworks of work familiar to design and technology and take it from themselves, applying it to their needs. Here again, you may recognize the business model canvas. GovLab created a new version specifically for policymakers in order to integrate lean approaches or more iterative ways of working into their activity. And all this knowledge and practice is feeding a set of digital academies for civil servants that are becoming government as usual in many places. I've always wondered why there is not such a thing for other disciplines and professionals like us. I even wrote to the Scottish Digital Academy once asking to join one of their courses, and they told me that it was impossible. That was only for civil servants. So what if there was a place where you could learn and be trained in this time for policymaking? What will it look like? What will we learn? What skills will we acquire, or who will go to this place? I think my feeling, Hans, is that our design practice will need some tweaks for the public sector, that we could evolve our frameworks expand our networks, diversify them, and feed collaboratively a dedicated practice for this, a specific practice for this. A practice where we don't talk about user-centered design, but we start discussing about citizen centricity and what is the meaning of that exactly, and how do we recognize citizen-centric governments? Do we see it because, as 2 years ago, if you wanted to measure the citizen centricity of a government, the metric was the number of services that were put online available to citizenship, which I think is not enough. Now this has changed and there are other dimensions taken into account, but still, I think it can be evolved even further, and we can include things like how are the services presented and expressed, how is the process of building these citizen-centric services, what are the characteristics that the technology is showing or facilitating to be reused, how proactive the government is learning to be so they can be ahead and behave more like the baby box example and less like the wheelchair example. How we recognize good services, how we evolve from a data extractive model where we are taking the data out of the citizens or extracting the data out of them to a more data empowerment model. Are those the dimensions we need to consider for citizen centricity? Are other dimensions we need to consider for this digital governance era? I don't know, but that's one thing I guess we could expand on in this place of design and public policy, or talk about the idea of digital public service brand experience. What is the meaning of that beyond graphics and UI components? How can we express how can we contribute to the expression of a public service in the way it behaves digitally and non-digitally? Create these patterns so it's easy for everyone and you can predict how the service will behave. Or I guess, you know, this reference from Ludown and their book about good services, which I found most useful because it's proposing a shared language, a way we don't talk about design or policy making, but we talk about other things, how to recognize good service, how do we know that it is well done. And one of the points that Lou mentioned in the book is that so far we have not needed that, because so far we were creating from scratch almost every service or every design for the private sector. So what's the point of having standards so defined that anyone can replicate in a way? But with the public sector, needs are different. And finally, who will attend and what will they do? Because public innovation is not just about it's not just a public sector business, and it concerns different activities and professions. Why do we want to keep them so separated between practices? I think that this space will contribute to better public services, and it will imply that the design practice changes and evolves, and it will create the opportunity to set the foundations for a dedicated discipline. I want to finish this talk with this question that I ask myself often, because I don't know if I mentioned, but I am not a civil servant and I don't work in the public sector. I work with them, And I am all the time with this question in my mind: how can my work contribute to better public services? And I would like to also hear you about this. How do you think your work can contribute to better public services? And I'm happy to hear you. I will stop sharing so I can see, to know if you have questions, comments, experiences to share, or
guys,
anything.
if you want to unmute yourselves, just do it. You have permissions now to do it, so feel free to make the questions you wish to Beatriz. If you are too shy to speak, you can do them on chat. It's okay. And thank you, Beatriz. It was a brilliant exposure. Yes, Damien.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Beatriz, for such a nice presentation. Really bold, I think, with some points. Well, I'm myself working as a public servant, not in Spain, in another country in Latin America. For the question that you say, even though I'm this is a path that I wanted to walk some years ago. I could imagine myself doing this for public services, looking at what UK was doing, or Australia. Now that I have the chance, I see also all the difficulties that you might walk during this path. For me, or for us, whatever we're trying to do, we are not as advanced as an innovative cell on the company, on the public company, if not some designers that are helping to make things look better. That's at the moment, I think, if you ask on our company what we're doing, but definitely bringing more accessibility to the people to understand better the data that you're showing. For example, we work on related, like a financial related company. So it's mostly about the market and stuff like that. So for example, for us, there's a lot of concepts that are new for us. Our job is to chew these concepts, to digest these concepts.
Can you give an example of the things that you identify like really new to you?
Yeah. So, for example, when we are speaking about the market and how the public policy it's influencing the market, or how does a public company make supervision to the companies that are in the stock market, for example, there's a lot of laws in many different shapes. You have circulares, you have laws, you have. So what you see is that we're starting to see this. Yeah, I'm not speaking like with all the affirmation. I'm starting to see this, but you have many laws that regulate the market on a country, and then while the country and the economy and the people evolves, they start to add patches. So we had a law that was really solid, but then after 5 years, something happens and you need to put a patch on it. So while we are designing something, we have to navigate and to understand so many patches. You understand the law, but you have to also understand how these patches are placed and how you can design to help people navigate these patches, but at the same time, how can you as a designer avoid the difficulties of these patches? So you need to be creative. So for example, maybe something cannot be done because I don't have a concrete example, sorry for that, but because there's many policies that I'm still trying to understand. But there's something that you might not be able to do, or something that the banks have to report to the government. And the way that it's designed right now, it's really stiff. So this is the way that it's supposed to be. it's not user-friendly, it's super difficult, it takes more time, it takes more money, it takes more human resources in like processing this information. So understanding these kind of problems, which are, I think, basic problems in all the public companies in this country, and design something that might, on this first phase, oiled up or put some oil on these gears. So if you can help a bit to move faster these gears, then you're doing something. And at the end,
Yeah.
and with this, I would finish. At the end, if these gears, when you are speaking about a public company, of course, it does impact the inner function of the company. But this company purpose is citizenship. So you end up also impacting citizenship if you can help them doing processes or activities that they have to do a bit more easy. If it's easier for the public servant, might be easier. That's a hypothesis for the citizens. That would be my point. And thanks again. Really interesting.
Thank you, Damian.
Thank you, Damian. Does somebody else want to make some questions to Beatriz?
Hi. Hi, Beatriz. Hi, Ivana. Thanks for the talk. Just wondering, you mentioned data empowerment when we were talking about the digitalization of government. I'm quite new to service design, so what do you mean by data empowerment? Do you have any specific examples?
If you see in Colombia, for instance, there is I'm sorry, now all my examples are related with GovTech startups. It's a bias of my work, but in Colombia, there is a company called Data Sketch that I really like, which is working with government and with associations and movements for the whole peace process. The way they are using the data and showing the data to citizens is empowering them to take actions or decisions on how to move along this really not easy process of the country. On the other side, you may have a government who is only taking data in order to build reports or in order to, I don't know, it can be, again, the intention can be good to have the data so they can decide the better policy, but how can we create services that are generating data that at the end of the day are giving back something to citizens, so are empowering society to do other things. That's what I mean with data empowerment.
Okay, perfect. So something like the banking apps helping you save money through budgeting and.
If you want, that could be an example.
Okay.
That could be an example, but in this case, banks want you to save money, so they also have the money. So something that is not so interested. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I have a question. I was thinking a lot about what you were talking about, the fifth element, no? And how sometimes public services, when taken over by private entities, end up giving two very different services, no? Like, for example, taking a visa for any consulate, that's usually outsourced. So it's very nice because you can have a tracking number and you can see exactly in which state your service is. But taking your national ID from a country, you have no visibility on that process, no? So sometimes I also wonder, how could we make a bridge and make like this idea of the best practice, no? So all services should be traceable or should be identifiable. because if it's available as a private service for a public need, then how could we translate it into other parts of government? I don't know if through your examples you've seen anything where something like that has happened.
I haven't, but what you mentioned is exactly is that point of how do we establish a minimum standard that we identify as good enough, or as something that we are entitled to ask for, because we have now very clear our rights as consumers, and we use them, and we go to one place like, I have the right to have this on my right, but we don't have this clear reference for public sector. We don't have a clear reference of, hey, I have the right to be the owner of my time. And it's not because the public service exists that is just good enough. That's great. We can't forget that. That's great. But we are living in a different moments to the ones that created those services. And we have not only different expectations, which is the rationale that is always used. The fact is that we have different talents. All the people around these events, all the people you know from your work related with design in a way or another, they are able to build, design, and develop amazing things that make people super happy, or they create different realities. We are ready to do that in the public sector as well. But we don't have the reference, and my fear is that we don't feel entitled to ask for that. Like, hey, this is not working, this is bad, and this could be done differently and better for everyone.
Yeah, because I think also the nice invitation would be is the definition of citizen, no? Because I think that's also not touched on, but as an expat living in another country, it doesn't feel like you have the same rights as every other citizen. So I think that's also something that when we talk about we have the right to ask for more, there's also a kind of privileged space, which feels very unsafe, no? But I think it's really nice also to think of this idea of citizenship, our rights as citizens, our responsibilities as well to maintaining these services healthy, no, and not spamming them. So super cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Humana.
This is a very interesting point, what Humana just said. Like, we are humans, right? So it should be based on that perception. So,
yeah, but the conversation about human, user, consumer, and citizen, which involves politics as well, and treating people as humans, is recognizing the fact that they have physical abilities and emotional needs and all those dimensions as human beings. But citizens have obligations as well. They have rights, but they have obligations also. And the conversation changes. The same way that public sector has obligations and governments need to be accountant of things in a way that private company doesn't. So I think this difference, this fundamental difference, should have an impact in the way we approach our practice. That's my hypothesis. I think the direct transfer of how we've been working in design for the last year, for the last decade, doesn't fit to the public sector needs either. It's not only that, as Damian said, it's really hard and the conditions are not favorable in the public sector, or like Jose Luis was asking, like, what do we mean? Because this new concept, suddenly no private company was talking about data empowerment. Public sector are very innovative and progressive in many ways. Last month in Spain, there was a new law about decentralized identity system based on blockchain. It's the first country in the world, and it's happening here. Remember the rest of the of the story about the social security. Yeah, I just think we need a different practice for this in between space.
I get you. Start working in some guidelines that can approach different
or different frameworks, or again be able to participate in different forums and networks. I think if this space is interesting for any of you, I will recommend that.
Definitely, because at some point we all end up having these kind of services, even if I think most of us here are designers and have all worked in agencies that we work for a large, a vast of different industries, and they all have their own concerns and their own specifications. And I really found funny when you said, like, I've done a bunch of services, like, we know the process, we are going to there to shine.
Exactly.
And suddenly
exactly.
you come with into this, and it's a bit different. The requirements are different, the depth is different, your approach has to be different, and sometimes it's overwhelming how to understand, like, how you can and should proceed.
I'm curious about, because I mentioned the example of Lab X in Portugal, which I quote every time I have the chance to, but I wonder how it's perceived from the side of Portugal, because it's very different when you see it from outside, like, hey, that's a great example, they are doing big things. How do you see that? Do you see the impact, any difference?
I'm not sure people are very aware of it, Beatriz, to be honest. I don't know, like,
okay,
for the Portuguese that are here, like, how many of them actually knew it? I don't think there's like a big perception. I think Luis wants to say something. Hello, Luis.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Joanna.
Hi,
Thanks
Luis.
to host this talk. Hi, Beatriz, for the nice talk. So I'm from a research center from Nova University in Lisbon, and
Okay.
in the last years we worked with several ministries. So, like Joanna says, I didn't knew the lab the lab X um, that you mentioned.
Okay.
Yes, it is true. And for instance, we worked for several ministries, like I said, and every one of them has his own guidelines, or there sometimes are missed, so there even exist at all. And it's a kind of messy because they are huge fences, so you can't penetrate on the system of one ministry or even one department inside the ministry. Okay, it's very hard to or like us inside the research center, or you are contracted, you have a contract to develop a system, like we did in, for example, the public administration ministry. Okay, but it's so difficult to manage, or to build some guidelines or best practices, or I've developed so many guidelines and white books, so and they didn't produce any effect, because in Portugal, the public sector, along with I'm just putting this in general. So
yeah,
I'm sure that there are some nice people that that work a lot in the right side, in the bright side, in the light side. So, but we have huge troubles in the public sector, because anyone is trying to do what what's the best for him inside his head. So
yeah, yeah,
it's not a policy, a group policy, not. I know that's the innovation, one sector, one governmental measure for innovation. One, and this is nothing to do with the LabX that you mentioned. But this innovation sector don't have. I think they want to merge some guidelines through the whole services, but it's hard to see. I see that in one of our partners or clients, like in the SPMS is like one huge sector, tech sector from the Ministry of health ministry, okay, and they are quite good on that, but other sectors, other ministries don't have that kind of impact and knowledge and so on. I've talked too much. Sorry.
No, but what? No. But what you mentioned, I mean, you're bringing the point of the asymmetry of how these kind of innovations are happening across different governmental bodies and institutions. Some of them have them, or they have the concern, or they are putting the energy there. Others don't. The fact is that if all these experiences or initiatives pop up individually, the effect is nothing, because you move from one ministry to the other, and you need a shared will, a shared political will of gaining this consistency, these standards, this minimum, these new ways of thinking services. And anything happening around digital is great opportunity, because if you see the conversation happening around algorithms and artificial intelligence and automated decision systems applied to public services and welfare services, those are the good conversations for design and public services. Not only guidelines, not only typefaces, official, for like, how are we approaching these new interactions between the society and the instruments of governments and public sector and welfare state? How are we moving into that? And all the conversation is being driven or tracked by the digital part, for the new generation of the digital part, I will say. But yes, this is some asymmetry that Luis mentioned. It's happening everywhere except in the UK. It's like or Australia, like the reference, or Chile. I think there is someone from Chile as well here. They have a great experience in the Laboratorio Ciudadano of that country.
Bea. Hey.
Hi, Ivan.
Hey, how are you guys? Hey, thanks, Bea, for the talk. It's very interesting. I love the space. I have a question for you. You know, we come from the private sector, and you know that there's like, you know, behind every, you know, innovation project, there's a main driver for the guy that's paying the project, you know, even if it's like, you know, sell more, be more efficient, you know, get more users, you know, it's very rare that the motivation of the of the people that of the part that's hiring the designer is like make people live better lives, and it should be, right? Yeah, especially in the public sector. But now that you are familiar with all these startups that they're doing, innovating in the space, and the projects that they stick, you know, they get to do something. What is the main driver from the public, you know, entities, or whether it's their countries, city town halls, or like, you know, regional governments or whatever, behind those innovations for the projects that, you know, they really, you know, get something done? It's like, you know, saving money. It's like, you know, doing more. It's just really making people live better lives.
You have
all of them.
You have the efficiency. No, but the efficiency driver is key, is fundamental. They need to, you can call it like Christian Basson put it in a super nice way, saying that it's about spending money wiser. It's another way also to, you can talk about efficiency in a very nice way doing that. And that is a very important driver. Then you have incentives, like the opportunities around fundings or trends, or this kind of, or a political agenda that is favoring this kind of transformation, like the kind of situation we have now. Or Europe, like in the case of Portugal, for instance, the Lab X is an initiative within a European scheme. So that's also an important incentive. And of course, you have the public value driver within some teams. But all these changes happen under a political umbrella. And performance, like a key driver in the private sector, and revenue is also present in the public sector. Depending on the type of service you are working with, or the type of public team you work with, this will have different weight in the final account. And that's why, again, I mentioned this topic about citizen-centric governments, because you hear that in every public innovation use case. Like, we want to put citizens at the center. We want to be citizen-centric. Yes, but what does it mean? Does it mean participation? Does it mean co-creation? Does it mean personalizing your screen? What's the meaning of that exactly? Because we use it without thinking, I think, without giving it too much thought, I would say, more than thinking. I wish I had a better answer for you, Ivan.
No, it's good enough.
A brighter one.
Good enough, good enough.
I don't know if somebody else wants to make more questions to Beatriz. I think you gave us a lot to think about. I speak for myself. Like it's what you just said, and you said before. It's thinking on a citizen-centric, and we are not used to think about that. Not even the people who ask for our services, but ourselves. And yeah. It's different. Very different.
I think it's a conversation that will take its shape by happening. Like, it's a conversation that needs to go public in order to happen, and not stay only in specialized groups, or something that needs to happen naturally, like consumers' rights. That's an expression everybody uses nowadays. So how do you say digital citizen? And Paloma, you're saying something about Chile. the time zone. We'll catch up later, Paloma, on another time.
But this question that Ivan made is also, it made me think on different things. Of course, when somebody requests a service from us, of course, we need to align to their business goals.
Yeah.
And to find ways to improve whatever we will design in order they have like metrics attaining these business goals. But we have our own metrics, like we have our own success metrics that are always based in how are we giving this journey, whatever that journey is, in a more easy and intuitive way for the user. But again, in the end, like I've only worked for 2 ministries in my life, and they were very different because we're Arabic countries and they have like a king, and you want to give everything. The king is demanding. It's not quite like our governments, because in our governments, I've never worked, but I assume it's a bit like, this is the business goal. We don't care about that thing. Doesn't matter if it's user-centric or citizen-centric. It's like, no, you are going to do this. This is what we want, and we want it like this. And you have the struggle to make them understand what could be better. But it's always with a political agenda kind of behind it. The ones that I felt is not that they didn't have a political agenda, because they all have political agendas, but they were actually trying to improve and to make a community out of that service. One of them was for the Ministry of Education, and their goal was that they had their students and their professors communicating with other universities and to create a kind of hub there. So it was something that was cool. And of course, the political agenda ultimately was like, say, okay, we have cool universities in Saudi Arabia, so come and check us out. But they were flexible and they were open to things. The other one that I worked was for Kuwait, I think, yes. And it was about requesting, so you have, if you want to go there, if you want to go to work there, and you have many people that do that, you need this kind of visa that a lot of times you have to have a sponsor, and it's all this complicated bureaucracy in order for you to work. And it was a site that kind of eases this for the user. So the user may need somebody, but he will have all the access to the documentation he needs, an explanation of this process and the guidance in this process. So there, I also thought they were quite open. But I believe, like in Portugal, you have the example you mentioned, but I think most of our services are really bad, and are really bad because of a lot of bureaucracy that we don't even understand. And I can give you an example. Like, I want to change my fiscal address, and you have this paper with a number that you need in order to do that. I'm Joanna, so I lose stuff, I lose papers. I lost that paper. So I went to the Citizen store and I asked, like, can you give me my number back, because I really want to change my fiscal address. And she was like, well, I cannot do that. You need to do a new citizen ID. And I was like, really? Like, for you to give me a number for me to access to my account, I need to do another citizen ID? And she was like, yeah, it's really weird. I know, I understand what you're thinking, but yeah, it's like that. And this is just an example of something that should be really basic. I have a passport, I have a driving license, I have a way to prove who I am, but that doesn't matter because that's not the way the law is made. And this is.
Where should we focus on designing services without those flaws, or without those unsolved journeys, or providing teams that can react to those situations, because it's impossible to make it all right I mean, there are so many situations, so many. The problem is how reactive and how can government adapt to these situations, because we won't have it all right from the beginning. Maybe this is a very basic, like you said, like how is that possible? But think about all the other situations that may happen. Dealing with society.
Dealing
with society, with people. I mean, it's so complicated. We lose things, we misplace papers, we forget. Yeah, it happens. We need flexibility. That's one of the fears of all the digital service generation in the public sector. Where is the flexibility if I cannot go wrong? If I cannot ask someone like, or the cases I was saying with the algorithms, where there is a machine deciding whether you need to get your benefit or not. And it said that if you miss 3 of your appointments and you're a working mom and your appointments are at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you won't make it because you have other duties, and you lose your benefits because that algorithm doesn't understand. Of course, it doesn't understand. How do we provide or create services and interactions that allow frontline staffs and citizens to readapt and readjust to these situations? I don't think we do that in our everyday lives as designers. I don't think policymakers do that in their everyday life as non-technological people. So that's where I think it's impossible to solve this situation without collaboration between all these disciplines. But we don't have a space where we meet with, or at least I don't. Maybe you do, but I don't see such spaces.
But that's the point. Maybe if designers could meet and create these spaces and create these discussions as you are doing, then they could make noise enough to make governments think, okay, maybe we should have a team just for this, to analyze what is wrong in this department and that department, and start having proposals for that. But to be honest, I think most of the designers don't work with these kind of cases. So we wouldn't even know where to start. And of course, it starts in conversations like this, like hearing people that actually have done this a bunch of times and have already some ideas. But I think it's very hard to grow such community. I think it's very interested, and I agree with you, very needed, but very hard, definitely.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just as much as everyone can do. Sometimes it's just, okay, taking the time to file the suggestion or to write the complaint, just to make them know. You will be surprised how they react to that.
I've never received any answer back. Like you start your talk saying like you bothered these guys from the museum. But
I keep the answers. I have different answers. They answer. Yeah.
That's very good. That never happened to me. That somebody answered. But yes,
right.
Maybe we just have to keep trying. That's the point, I guess. Guys, I don't know if this is becoming late for you. For me, it's been a very enriching conversation and a lot of food for thought here, I believe, for all of us. So maybe you have to come more time, Beatriz.
Whenever you want, and I can share more examples of GovTech if you're interested on that, or actually you can invite people from the LabX team. It's amazing, really. Sometimes you need to see it from other angles to know that,
Yes, it could be.
You have a cool team of design in there.
Thank you, Beatriz. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Last chance to make some question. No. I'll try.
Or share experiences.
Or share
Whatever you
experience.
want.
No, I think
Or we can call it a day. And thank you very much, everyone. And have a nice weekend and end of the week.